please help me give a warm welcome to Miss Moira Vetter.
Thank you. Hello, hello. Oh, good. Well, I was here a few years ago, and I was joking earlier that I was called by a colleague of mine a couple nights before she was supposed to speak here, and she said, "Oh my God, I'm going to be taken out of town. You've got to do me a favor. I need you to go down to Georgia Tech." And I said, "Oh, absolutely. I'm very happy to fill in for you." And she said, "Yeah, but I need you to do my speech." And so I was here last time with somebody else's content, so hopefully the content will work this time too. So I'm here to talk to you today about the subject of risk and the relativity of risk. And I think about young people, in the world, considering the path ahead for them. There's so much hope and there's so much opportunity and so many choices that you have at this time. And risk is is something important. And often for people that are in technical fields or specialist fields, you may not have had people in there, banging the drum of how important risk taking is. So hopefully I'll cover a little of that today. So you may wonder, what is this road? And Robert Frost has a poem, The Road Less Traveled. And I, in 10th grade, was supposed to select a poem. And I selected The Road Less Traveled. And I had no idea how inspiring, formative that poem would be and how resonant it would be with me today. And so you have to indulge me because you've got to get the content of this poem. It really helps set up this conversation of the relativity of risk. So the poem is, "Two roads diverge in a yellow wood, and sorry I could not travel both and be one traveler. Long I stood and looked down one as far as I could to where it bent in the undergrowth. Then taking the other as just as fair, and having perhaps the better claim, because it was grassy and wanted wear, though as for that the passing there had worn them really about the same. And both that morning, equally laid in leaves no step had trodden black, I saved the first for another day, yet knowing how way leads on to way, I doubted if I should ever come back. I shall be telling this with a sigh, somewhere, ages and ages hence, two roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one less traveled by, and that has made all the difference." It may seem really long to you, it seems really short to me, but it really is amazing in setting up for you the opportunity and the promise of the choices you make. And there are a couple things that always struck me when I was younger about that poem that I didn't get till I was older. The thing about the sigh at the end. I shall be telling this with a sigh, somewhere ages and ages hence. And sighs can be good and sighs can be bad. And there's a lot when you look back on your life. And really pushing yourself to take great risks, to take that chance, can really lead to interesting journeys and interesting thoughts that you have about the path that you've taken. So let's talk about my journey. And what I hope to do is walk you through some of those crossroads that I found myself at personally, some of the decisions I made, and how I viewed risk based on the filter that I learned. And so the first thing I want to talk about is how we learn risk, right? And so I've got risk profiles and tolerance are learned. So, every one of you in the room has a different idea of what would be a risky move. And so, that could be you're about to graduate and you've been offered X position. And for some of you, that could be a risky choice, right? Could have huge opportunity, might be very entrepreneurial, but less traditional stability. Some of you might come from families that have had a particular path or course of employment, and sort of veering outside of that, would suggest that you're taking an unnecessary risk. And so one of the things that's really important for you at this place in your life is to understand what you think about risk and how you define it, not how your parents defined it for you. Now, that said, I love the way my parents defined risk for me, and so I want to talk about them for a minute. On the left, you have a beauty queen on a tractor. And on the right, you actually have the original photograph of my father marching in the Hungarian Revolution. And these two people could not have been more different. But what they were really good at was taking risks and not being afraid. And they really taught me that at an early age. My mother was born one of 5 children, extremely poor. They did not have indoor plumbing. And she grew up in Delaware, so a very agricultural community, one of many children. And the first major risk she took was leaving her high school sweetheart as he proposed to her with the families all around, because she wanted to get a larger life, right? She wanted to go to the big city. She wanted to see all she could be. It was during the throes of the women's movement, the early women's movement, and so she did not want to settle. She didn't want to be small. She didn't want to be defined by what she had known the past 18 years. So she escaped to New York City and, met with fabulous, wonderful people, and, really sort of broadened her own horizons and expanded the canvas that she wanted at play in her life. My father was the opposite of my mother. He was born extremely wealthy. They had farms, they had rental properties, they had a chemical manufacturing company. And in his early years, he really lived the sweet life. And then as he came into his teens and his 20s, communism took hold in Hungary. And so one by one, the properties, the assets, the goods, the animals, everything was taken from them. They lost their chemical manufacturing plant, they lost the farm, they lost everything they had. My grandmother was taken to the secret police. There were all kinds of horrific things that happened. And he escaped by cover of night, and he took a boat to Ellis Island in New York City to start a new life. And he really believed in the American dream. And so there's kind of a thread of escape, but what I really think is important in both my mother and father and how that has informed me was not what you're escaping from, but what you're escaping to, and why you're moving towards something that you perceive as bigger or better than where you have been. So in my case, the American dream as call to action. My parents ran a pharmacy, and so when I was 7, I began working in their pharmacy. I got to see entrepreneurship up close and personal. I took the school bus after school every day to the pharmacy, and I worked. At age 7, I started working register there. My father was the pharmacist, and my mother was the manager of the store. And they really beat into me every day the importance of work, the importance of being productive. I've never been one of these people that thought, man, I can't wait till the weekend's here and I can stop all this work. I've always been someone that really viewed work as an opportunity to do something, to do more, to help people, to produce. I caught that from them, and I am very happy about that because it's really helped me in times in my life when being productive is a really therapeutic thing for you. So the American dream lived deep in our household, and I really also got the understanding that entrepreneurs in general are really the fabric of their community. And there is something about being in a sort of mom and pop business in a hometown where you are more than people going to a job. The people that you employ are more than employees. They are family members to you. And so I was raised in that environment, and I always brought those things with me as I entered the workforce. So if any of you have an entrepreneurial parent, have had that influence around you, I really encourage you to hold on to those qualities and those pieces of advice and some of those things that you've seen at work in your parents or other family members. I think it will really serve you as you grow. So one day the dreams of your father and mother become your own. So fast forward a decade from the previous slide, and I am 19. I'm a college dropout in under 9 months. And I was in South Florida, and I thought that the riskiest thing that could happen would be my soul would die in South Florida. I had no purpose, I had nothing to do, and I had to get out. So here's this escape gene coming back in. But the question is, where would I escape? And I loved Atlanta. I had been to Atlanta, and I thought, man, this is a big city. There are so many things going on here. It is just truly a melting pot in the South, right? There are businesses, there are big businesses, there is thriving entrepreneurship. And in contrast to West Palm Beach, that had an average age of probably 68 at the time, the average age here was 27, which was very attractive to me. So I decided to come to Atlanta, and being the parents that they are, my parents said, that's fantastic, go to Atlanta. And I didn't say, hey, can you help me get to Atlanta? Can you give me a car? You know, any of that. I just said, I'm going to Atlanta. My mother gave me a $20 bill, and she said, good luck. And I got a Greyhound bus ticket, and I was able to bring 75 pounds worth of clothes on Greyhound. That was their weight limit. So I brought 75 pounds worth of clothes. I had a couple $100, bought my ticket, came here. And the fourth day I was here, I got a job working at the gas station on the corner of Claremont and North Decatur Road, the BP station over there behind Evans Fine Foods. Made $3.45 an hour. It was awesome. And, you know, I just got here and I said, I'm going to go where I know the opportunity is, and then I'll figure it all out when I get here. So I got here and I got the job, and I wasn't here more than a week. And the friends that I was staying with said, oh, you can't live here anymore because our mom said we only have 2 people on this lease, and, you know, we're going to get kicked out if we have a third person. So you're going to have to move out. You know, you have a few days. So not what I was planning for, but being the non-risk averse person I was, I opened up Creative Loafing. I found an apartment on Columbia Drive in Decatur with 2 guys from Pakistan, an American arms dealer, and a pothead that worked at UPS. And I, you know, to this day, I love Yalchin because I was able to ride his entirely oversized 10-speed for me to work. I had no car. But to me, the biggest risk about moving into that house was being a 19-year-old female sharing a bathroom with 4 adult males. And it was pretty interesting. So at that point, I moved from the gas station. I got a temp job. And life changed very quickly. And, you know, this all may seem like, wow, entry level, retail, whatever. You know, I made this transition very quickly. I came to Atlanta in June. I was in the temp company by end of the year. I was living with a roommate somewhere else. And I used that temp position and leveraged it to get into a tech startup. And really, that was the beginning of the rest of my life then. I was able in that time, and this is something I really encourage any of you that have the chance, I was able because I worked in a small business. We were 3 at the smallest and 8 at the largest, to wear every hat in the place. So despite the fact that they brought me in and I was 19 and I had no college degree, I was able to first be receptionist, as you might expect when people still answered the phone. I then was able to do customer service and learn about the technical realities of our products and fulfilling and keeping our customers satisfied. I then wanted to do finance, so I was the bookkeeper for a year until I got tired of that. And they said, well, hire a replacement, and then what would you like to do next? And I said, I'm really interested in this sales and marketing thing. I want to know more about that. And I ended up working with the first agency that we had on our first campaign. And so in that time, I was able to try so many things. I was there a little over 3 years, which seems a lifetime to a lot of entry-level people today. It was not very long when I started in the workplace. But I saw tremendous income growth. I bought my first car. I had a 2-bedroom apartment by myself. I had a lot of things that I was able to do in building a foundation for myself. But more than the things I was able to have, the car, the apartment, was the learning, right? The learning that I got in a real job, right? And I did start going to college at night at the time. I went to several colleges. I've been to almost every college. But as I was getting that education at night, I was still developing myself professionally by day with the people around me. Being around those early entrepreneurs, and this is something I really encourage you to appreciate while you're here. Georgia Tech is a particularly entrepreneurial environment. The amount of incubation that goes on around here, the many opportunities that you have, it was very formative to me not to be around young people who weren't making enough or weren't happy or weren't going to grow fast enough, but to be around people who saw nothing but possibility, who just could not get there fast enough, who wanted to be in front of people that also would be excited or passionate about what they did. And so to the extent that you can surround yourself with these people, if you haven't done it thus far, hang out with them because it rubs off, right? That creativity, that energy, and that optimism that entrepreneurial people have really rubs off, and you need it when you're young. Okay, so the next phase I call the first decade of ascent. So I took that foundational learning, and I had somebody offer me a job in California. And so you would think with my background, I would just say, ooh, that's cool. I don't know what California is. I'm going to fly off to California. And I had someone here who said, you know, you've already been, you know, laying down roots here, learning the city, growing your skill base, and you haven't looked locally to see if you could keep building on that. And so I did a lot of volunteer work at the time, and I met with one of the women that I did volunteer work with, and she said, oh, well, as a matter of fact, I work at an agency, and we're looking for someone to join the firm. And again, I didn't have traditional agency experience, although I had worked with the agency when I was at the technology company. I still didn't have the college degree, but she was very enthusiastic because she knew me. So she brought me in, and that job really was the beginning of who I became as an adult. I was at the company for 8 years. I got to grow in every position on the org chart all the way into agency management. And the thing that was amazing there was, again, it was a smaller firm where you got to take chances. They never took chances on me as fast as I wanted them to. And that is something I think young people always want, something in 6 months or a year that perhaps they need a few years to grow into, realistically speaking. But if you're working with people that show you where you are on that path and show you what you need to acquire to fill in those gaps, it's a much better environment to be in. And so I was in that kind of environment. I also had an amazing role model. And that's something, when you think about, you know, going out and, let's say, starting your first company or joining, you know, the first company that you want to work with, really look at who the leaders are at the company. What do they stand for? How accessible will they be to you? How passionate are they about younger people? I mean, this was something when I gave my talk a couple of years ago. I was talking on the subject of engineering, right, and technical engineering majors. And in a lot of the companies they have to enter, they do not have this robust young workforce. You have a lot of very senior, seasoned people who may have been in those positions for 10 or 20 years. And unless you're with a company that really is trying to connect the dots generationally, you may not have these opportunities. You might have to wait, or you might have to move somewhere else to get those opportunities. And so I really do encourage you to be very candid with the people you work with, not in a demanding way like you expect it, but that you want them to meet you halfway. You want to become the things that would make the company better, and you want to acquire the skills that would make you better. And if they're not going to facilitate that for you, you will, because it's your job anyway to do that. So, great. I am at this company 8 years, as you may imagine. When you're 31, I'd been at the company, I turned 31. So 8 years when you're 31, it's a third of my life, right? This was who I was. The person that worked at this company, the job title I had, it had so defined who I was. Freed up for industry, unemployment, or entrepreneurship. So after having been at this company for 8 years, and you may see this when you're a little bit older, some of you are older, but for the younger people here, about every 4 to 8 years in very popular industries, companies will come to town and they will buy up the smaller firms, and they will roll them up into a larger entity. And so in most businesses, you will see that happening. And so in 2001, company came to town and bought the firm that I had been with. I did not see it coming. I never thought that would happen. I thought I would, end up forever at that company. And so it was a real shock to my system. They bought the company, and within about a month, they had messed up the Atlanta transaction. They determined they hadn't properly vetted all the firms they were trying to roll up, and they just decided to pull out of Atlanta. So despite all the positive talk about how great it was going to be for us after the sale, it wasn't, and we had 2 weeks' notice. And at that time, sometimes you choose these forks in the road, right? You have opportunities, you see a better path, you go seek the opportunity, and sometimes life deals it to you, right? It will say, guess what, here's a road, and you have to make a choice. In my case, I chose not to go work for someone else. I chose to start a company at that time. For one thing, I was 31 and, of course, knew everything there was to know in the world, having just spent the last 8 years working at that company. And so I felt wholly qualified to run my own company. And in some respects, I was right, and in many respects, I was absolutely wrong. So I managed to keep that company afloat for 3 years, which, if you know anything about entrepreneurial people, is a lifetime. Many, many companies do not make it 3 years. But there were a lot of things at work. And in the same way, when I was at the 2 previous agencies, both the tech startup and the agency, which focused solely on technology during the 90s when everything was about technology. It was pre-internet and the emergence of the internet. It was prior to the Atlanta Olympics and all of the tremendous investment that took place here in the city to grow our technology infrastructure. That was a wonderful time to be in those spaces. So in 2001, when I started my business doing marketing to technology companies, it was the dot-bomb. And every technology company went out of business, and if they didn't, they certainly cut their marketing spend down to zero. So I, at that point, was ready to have a business. I felt prepared from my previous experience, but I really was not, I did not have alignment with the business I was trying to run, to the people I was targeting, and that really aligned with my experience and where the economy was. And that was horrifying. It was a wake-up call. But it's really important to think, to parse things out and to look at that, because you will have many opportunities, and you will need, if you find yourself not fitting in the right space, or you thought you had this great opportunity and maybe you're not growing as quickly as you thought, you need to look at all of those things. Sometimes the thing that's not working, it may not be, I'm not qualified to do this. Or it may not be, you may be wonderfully qualified, but you're in the wrong place. Or, it could be that you're not qualified at all and you're in exactly the right place. And you need to be more candid with the people you work with to become someone else, to expand your skill set, or to try something else. So there are a lot of things that you can learn if you find yourself at a crossroad like that. So like most people in my early 30s, who had a very successful job for 8 years, I was living beyond my means. I did finally have a car, right? Got that 3 years after getting to Atlanta. But I was really living as if this would be what my life was forever, right? I called that the decade of ascent because I thought it was a straight line now, right? I was able to go from here to here, and it's just going to keep going, right? So here's the trajectory of spend, of acquisition, of fun, of influence, of all of that. And when you hit a window like that where the market corrects or the business corrects, it corrects you very quickly. And it's a very maturing experience. And so I found myself with a house I could no longer afford right when the housing crisis was crashing. And I decided that I needed to get out. And I had been operating the business, balancing the debt back and forth between the house and the car. Many first-time entrepreneurs will tell you that they really rely on their house, as security against debt. And it was really tough to decide I was no longer going to be able to keep that business going, and I needed to get rid of this house. And the only way to do it is do it, to decide and to make the move to do it. Now, I had some friends at the time, because there was a lot of bad things going on in the economy with the housing crash and with the dot-com era. And a lot of people said, oh, just file bankruptcy, take the foreclosure, whatever, right? It happens to everybody, it's all good. And I was not raised that way. My debts are my debts. I got the benefit of whatever I took a loan for, and it was not okay to me to write that off, in the same way that when I left the first company, I did not file for unemployment. I know there's more I can do here, and if I have not exhausted everything I can do, I'm not going to go for those means of support or safety. So I worked diligently with the mortgage companies. I worked out a 1-year payoff deal. I sold the house at a huge loss, but within a few years, I was able to get all of the debt clear, and my credit was intact, which was critical for future entrepreneurship. And again, if you're young, you might think, whatever, right? I'm 23. I bought this. I shouldn't. I maxed out all these credit cards, and it's easier to do some paperwork. But if you ever hope to be an entrepreneur, your personal credit is going to be critical to people's willingness and interest to loan you money, and to the faith they have in how you recognize your debts and your obligations and your contracts. And so it was very important to me, and I'm really glad that I made the choices that I made regarding that. So sometimes you got to get a paycheck. Now, there are a lot of people that I knew at the time that thought it was a horrific thing, a terrible risk to go back to work. And you will hear this a lot. Anybody who has run their own business, let's say the business sells, or it hasn't been successful, and they go get a job, right? Everybody thinks that's supposed to be a bad thing, right? You were free. You ran your own business. Why would you want to go back and work for someone else like it's this evil thing? And in my case, the greater risk was to continue to delude myself that I was going to be able to make a go of it in the wrong economy with the wrong business without the stability of the capital that I needed to do it. And so for me, the greater risk was to keep doing that. And so I went and I took a job. And as I have any time I was confronted with an opportunity or a crossroads, I look at what's going on in that company, and I never view it as a retreat, right? This wasn't my my less than situation, right? It wasn't a consolation prize that I went and got this job. It was healthier for me to go get this job, because now I can gain some more stability and I can continue to acquire new skills, and it's going to be a good thing. And that is my attitude about it. So I went to work at a company that in the first week I was there had a minority interest made in their company, an investment by North Highland Consulting Company. And North Highland is a $100 million consulting company. And later you'll understand, but management consultants and creative people have very little in common. It is the ultimate oil and water. And it's very difficult. Management consultants are paid to be critical, to find fault, to be logical to a fault, and very process-oriented. And creative people are paid to ignore process sometimes, and to be illogical, and to all of these things that really set that up to be an interesting situation. So my job, starting my new job, was to figure out how to make that work, how to make the two firms work together, and how to make a third stream of revenue between the two companies by making them work efficiently together and being able to scale that. And I took that on as an amazing challenge. And having worked 60 hours a week at my last job at the agency, I now work 80 hours a week at this company, making that happen, creating this reality. And it was amazing because having worked in companies that were $3 million in revenue or $5 million in revenue, I now was able to work side by side with the people running a $100 million company. So the scale of the challenges, the credibility of the client served, the gravitas of the people in the room, all of that went up, and all of that continued to contribute to my growth and development in terms of who to be, how to be, what I was learning from. I worked directly with Kirk Hancock, who was the CFO of that firm, and in terms of how to operate and how to think about capital and how to handle an entrepreneurship handle an entrepreneurial situation, not in the way that a solopreneur would, but as an organization that actually had access to capital and thought anything was possible. So it was amazing for me in that time to work with that company. And I, again, was able to exponentially expand the skills that I have and really form the next foundation or the next plateau for me to jump off. And so, this slide. Milestones as motivators, right? Birthdays are great motivators, personally and professionally. So I already mentioned that I moved here when I was 19. I wasn't a college graduate. You know, I came on a Greyhound, a lot of risk. And so when I turned 20, you know that I had a list of things, right? It's not the bucket list when you're 20, right? It's the pre-bucket list, right? I gotta do these basic things. Same thing happened when I was 30 because that .com crash and the leaving that other agency was right around the time I was 30, right? There was a lot of stuff going on. And so similarly, as I approached my 40th birthday, I don't know, something about me and these major decade milestones, I really start to not only look forward, but look back, right? Where have I been? What am I doing? How's the path look? What could I be doing? What am I not connecting, right? And to me, that is, you know, being able to navigate risk is one thing. Missing wonderful opportunities because you are afraid to take those risks is even worse. And the older you get, the more critical that becomes to you, right? Because when you're young, it's, I took this, I didn't. And the older you get, the stakes get higher because you don't have as many of those decisions to make anymore, right? You know, you only get a couple of big, huge life-changing decisions, at least in my generation, right? We stayed at jobs 3 and 5 and 8 years. But in my case, and not to be morbid, but, you know, I used to do this slide, and it was more about the milestone as the motivator in turning 40. But another thing that happens when you get older, and I hope it doesn't happen to anyone in this room, but mortality is also a motivator. In the last 5 years, I lost my last living grandparent, my father, and my mother. And when you lose the people that the whole time you were becoming that person, so you could send that magazine article home or whatever, you know, send them the email, oh my God, I got this title raise, whatever. When the people that you always used as your bar for, I must be performing, I'm getting the right validation, they're proud of me, when those people aren't there to give you that anymore, you really do have to look inside. You really do have to ensure you're not defining yourself by someone else's risk tolerance or design of success, but your own. And so, you know, having been through that and coming up to that 40th birthday, I started doing soul searching in that company. And I decided, you know, I'm not as passionate about this job now. I have been growing. I have learned a lot of things, but I want to do it myself. You know, I had that early bug of entrepreneurship, of being in our own business and unlocking the door and going there, and I wanted that back. And there were a lot of things that were on that bucket list at that time. You know, I wanted to finish the damn degree, right? Okay? You know, I needed to get my college degree. I never had kids, right? What the heck? I'm 37. I'm going to be old as dirt in a minute, right? There's a lot of stuff that I want to do. And so I encourage you to use those milestones as motivators. And there can be a lot of milestones. You know, 21 is a big one for a lot of people. You know, you can set mini milestones in there, but do track yourself on where did I think I would be by this point? And have I been living safe, right? Or have I been shooting beneath my own potential, right? And encourage yourself to take some of those risks around the major milestones, because you might be really comfortable here, but maybe you can convince yourself at a few points in your professional life that, man, this is the window that I'm really going to take that risk because I'm going to really try to elevate where I'm going. So the second time is a charm, or the 20th time is a charm for a lot of entrepreneurs. The best people to learn from are failed entrepreneurs, right? The people that made it the first time, you know, where all the stars aligned and they never needed profit and everybody lined up to give them money, you know, have a whole lot less interesting stories than all the people that fell down and lost their money and lost their house. And, you know, again, they do a lot of maturing in that process. You have to be honest with yourself. So this time out, when I created Modo, and we're coming up on our 9th anniversary now, I was able to look back and sort of craft a company based on all the things I didn't want it to be, based on what I had seen, and all the things I did want it to be. But in doing so, and in growing, you also take on an unbelievable amount of risk. And this goes back to those credit scores I talked about earlier. When you are an entrepreneur and you are on the line for the capital and you experience growth, I mean, I thought I had stress when there were 2 or 3 of us and, we had money in the bank and I couldn't figure out how to pay taxes. That's one thing. We have a 20-person agency. I have a 7-year lease. That's a whole different, you think signing on the closing documents for a house is a sort of threatening or off-putting environment, any of you who have. It's nothing like signing a 7-year office lease, right? There's more zeros at the end, and it's scary. It's really scary. And so when you get into that next level of entrepreneurship up from, I can make it, I can sort of do a solopreneur, or 2 or 3 of us can make enough money to not have to go work for somebody else. It's very different. It's very different when you're scaling an organization. And I love what I do. I wouldn't change it for anything in the world, but your priorities change too. Risks for me now are not allowing other people to grow, right? Because this company needs other people to come up in the organization. So, when I was 25 or 30, the risk was me not being the best one in the meeting or not securing the client's confidence. Risk for me now is not providing enough rope or training or getting the right people in for those people to do that with the clients. So, perspective shifts in terms of who you're in the boat with and, who you surround yourself with. And so I really want to end with this thought, and it's similar to the Robert Frost poem, right? When you look back on your life and you've got that sigh. And so this quote I've always loved, the Relativity of Risk: "Be bold and courageous. When you look back on your life, you'll regret the things you didn't do more than the ones you did." And this is true with almost everything except tattoos. That's the exception. You can really regret a tattoo. But, I brought up the bucket list earlier. When you are young, when you are at that early fork in the road, make the boldest list of things that you want to accomplish, both not just places to be, right? Things you want and places to be, but people you want to be. Who do you want to be? Who do you aspire to be? What do you want to create, right? Because a lot of people know that they want to go see the pyramids and they want to drive a nice car, but they don't spend as much time thinking about what kind of people they want to be associated with, right? If you do want to create a business, what kind of people do you want in that business with you? Because you're going to have to be with them every day. Really think about some of those other things, some of those softer measures that aren't covered in textbooks and maybe your parents don't talk about with you when you are early in, creating a life plan, a career plan, a jumping off point. Think about some of those softer things so that when you do look back on your life, you can really look at those risks, not as risks, but opportunity. So hopefully my little dance through my series of risks can give you some sense of both the promise and opportunity that attitude have in terms of really turning challenges into opportunities. Also, again, don't let anyone else besides you define what risk and what success are for you. And let me tell you, over the course of my career, that definition has changed constantly. And that's the importance of those milestones so that you keep resetting that measure for yourself. You may have only ever thought, okay, I'm going to get this degree, I'm going to do these things, and if I get this this is the name of the job I want. Check that, right? Check it at the end of getting the degree. I know you don't want to tell your parents, I've decided I want to do something else, right? Big risk, but check it early. And be sure when you look back on your life that that's a good sign.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
I guess I'm starting off the questions real quick, but kind of going into the next step with Modo, what are some of the risks and I guess general attributes that you and Modo take into account when doing business with startups and other companies in general?
In terms of the people that we choose to do business with, I will say that risky for us, first-time entrepreneurs are not our kind of people. And I will say that for a reason. First-time entrepreneurs are very emotional about their business, right? They're emotional about the name, about the logo. You know, they get very wrapped up in that brand and all it can be, and they usually get there in advance of really defining a business model and getting the kind of consulting that they would need to really determine they can go to market and be great in the market. So we really do consider those kinds of people a risk. We are much more interested in people who can speak the language of business. So not just the people that understand their technology or its promise, but the people who can speak about why that matters to an audience. And so I would encourage any of you, if you're inventing something or creating something, it doesn't matter how cool you think it is, it better work for someone, and you really need to, sort of fixate on what that is and how you're going to develop that. Yep. Okay.
Hello,
Hi.
I'm Jose Rodriguez, graduating a senior here at Georgia Tech.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Finally, a lot of us are about to move into the workforce, and with that, we might compare starting salaries with our friends, or maybe not about like opportunities. Some of our friends might get better job offers. To students, what do you say to them to avoid being disheartened?
Okay.
Yeah.
The first thing I will tell you is every salary survey is a lie. Okay, so forget the salary surveys. I mean, you can compare with your friends, and that's real data, but salary surveys are not real. Usually they are created by search consultants and people that have something to gain by driving a salary up. What I would say is, and this is hard, I mean, especially when you need money, right? The more money you can get when you need money, the better it is. But if you can try to look a little further out from that, you have to consider the starting salary and any evidence you have that that firm grows people. And I don't just mean throws new titles at them. That is something that, that we, in the agency space, often are challenged with. A lot of the big agencies will not really incrementally raise salary over a period of time, but every 6 months they'll give somebody a new title, right? So you were junior, now the junior's gone. Now you're an assistant something, now you're assistant senior something. And you really haven't, your job descriptions has not changed at all. And so that's something really, when you're looking at these things, you need to kind of have a more complex view than the number, right? So it's the number, it's the growth potential, it's the speed of that growth, it's the access to the other people to help develop you. And then I think if you have things like that to compare, then you shouldn't be, like again, back to sort of the ego thing, right? Well, you got a job for 45 and I got a job for 65. Yeah, but the job that I got, that I'm taking for the 45, I have tremendous access to the owner. We expect 100% growth in the next 2 years, which is going to create much faster opportunity for me. So you got to be more holistic about that. Mm-hmm.
My name is Lizzie Lisenby, and my question for you is, what is your best just overall blanket advice for young female entrepreneurs at Georgia Tech right now, today?
Oh boy. You're just the same as the guys. I would start with that. I was mentored by a female entrepreneur, and she was the first female president of TAG, Technology Association of Georgia. Back then it was the Business and Technology Alliance, and she was so pissed off when she got that, and people started to say, oh, you're the first female president, because, and she said, well, who cares what my gender is? I'm great, I'm qualified, I'm going to take this thing to the next level, not because I'm a woman, but because I have vision for it. And I really encourage people, I know there are some disadvantages to women in business, often self-inflicted, and I'll tell you what those are, but you really need to start out with the view that it's an even playing field. Two areas that women entrepreneurs really, especially if you're interested in entrepreneurship, need to look closely at are your relationship with capital. Women often are afraid to ask for more, whether that's going to get a loan in some sort of financial negotiation. You need to get uber comfortable with the money. And another thing is in terms of growth itself. Often men will see the entrepreneurial playing field as a platform for them, right? I created it, I'm going to grow it, I'm going to sell it, I'm going to do whatever. Often women will create something and it's her baby, right? And as soon as you create something that's your baby, you've already created the reverse that you want in terms of growth. And so in terms of growing with the business, you need to see your own identity as separate from it. I know a lot of female entrepreneurs that as soon as their business hits some sort of struggle or challenge, they take it on emotionally, and get all concerned about their ability to lead, in a way that men don't. So those are the things I would encourage. Forget that you're female. Focus on the numbers, and give yourself all the credit that anyone else in the room would expect to have.
Hi, my name is Demi, and I'm a fourth year here. And my question is about how you assess the risks that you personally take, like how you decided to stay and not go to California. And your reason was that you could grow roots, but since you didn't already have roots in Atlanta, wouldn't it have been easier to move to California? How did you decide that wasn't the best decision?
I'm kind of a go with the gut girl. I will say that. I do a lot better job analyzing when I look back than when I'm looking forward, because I do move quickly. To me, at the time, when you bring up that example of why didn't I go to California, what stuck with me about that was I'd been here 3 years, and it was all my adult years, right, my grown-up independent years. So for me, those were big roots. I mean, it felt like forever to me. And this was the place I had first been a grown-up on my own. So I did feel I'd been here forever. But the other thing was the opportunity I had for the job in California was in a place I did not know with people I didn't know. And it seemed like it had promise. I did a little bit of homework and research, but there were so many unknowns about it. And when the opportunity locally presented itself, I knew the people, I'd volunteered with the people, I could go down and see it and touch it, and I knew Atlanta. And so that is something, when you're taking a risk, don't move into a place where everything about it is unknown. Make sure you've got something that can give you some sort of calculated risk decision about it. I may not know the people, but I really know this space. Or I may not know the space of the people, but everybody knows this company, and according to Wall Street, it's stable. Or whatever. Or find people. When I made that decision, there was no LinkedIn, right? Find the people that know the people and find out from them if it's a good decision. So, yes, ma'am.
My name is Stephanie. So can you talk to us about how you balance all your entrepreneur goals and work with being involved in the community? I noticed on your LinkedIn page that you've been really involved with various associations and the zoo. Like, how do you get that all done?
There is no such thing as balance. Stop looking for it. You just do it. I mean, and again, this, I keep talking like I'm 100 years old, but the older you get, the easier it is to make room for those things. They are more essential. I've always been one of these people that I didn't think I was going to clear space and make room for something else. I just shove it all in, right? And it may shove something else out, and likely that will be the less important thing. But I've never looked for balance. I've never tried to balance. I've just known all the things I want to accomplish, and then every time an opportunity presents itself to contribute, to give back, to grow, to learn, I figure out how to shove it in there.
You don't compartmentalize, like this is like your different activities?
Okay, all right. So, all right. So I do love the saying by Napoleon Hill about living in a day-tight container, because that is important. There was a story years ago when I started in marketing. There was a woman in PR. I don't know her name, thankfully. But she had overcommitted, and she served on too many boards, and was was growing crazily, and she actually went catatonic at her desk. And this, I don't know, it was in the 80s. And so everybody knew about it, and they were like, no, seriously. She said she'd do all this stuff, and then she didn't move, and they had to bring in the gurney and, take her away from the desk. And so I always thought that might happen to me. It has not. But in terms of containers, you do have to have priorities, right? You have to have values. And I'm a little nerdy. I have a spreadsheet that I update every year, and it has different sections, and they're broken into quarters. So I have a company goals section. I have a personal professional goals section. I have a personal family goals section, a personal health section. And then I break that into quarters, and I decide what I ought to be accomplishing. I've kept that for 8 or 9 years. Rarely at the end of the year does it exactly match up, but it's pretty unbelievable when you write it down and you set the goal, how close you come to doing those things. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I have a question about
Yeah.
your agency. You work a lot with startups, is that correct?
We work more with second stage entrepreneurs. So less on the startup side, more on the second stage. So they could be companies who have been acquired and are rebranding or repositioning, companies that are being rolled up. Often it's larger companies who are acquiring a small startup and trying to integrate them into the organization.
Okay. In terms of these services, do you focus primarily on branding, or do you work with these organizations to help them get their product correct or help them get their market properly defined? How do you help them kind of gain traction, so to speak, in the marketplace?
Well, so when I mentioned, not working with startups, the current business doesn't, but earlier in my career, I've worked with over 200 companies, and I did work with a lot more startups earlier in my career. And what we will often do, we are a full service agency, so it's more than, what is the name, what is the brand, how do you push the marketing out to market, and it is a lot of that positioning. Even if people don't know that's what they're coming to get, people could say we need a new website, we need our identity to, to be more progressive. But what they really need is to consider who they're competing against, who their customers are, and to do a better job aligning that. So really, we're kind of bad about drawing a nice, clean line around marketing. We edge into sales, into positioning, into some areas of senior management and development, often working very closely with the senior executives. A little less so in the product side, certainly in the technical areas. We have a lot of extremely complicated companies, and we would not pretend to know all the details in terms of developing product, but we can certainly check them in terms of how they're positioning their customer base, and are they being realistic about entering a market.
Is this working? Oh, hi, my name is Ashley, and my question for you is that you had a pretty interesting and eclectic stories that help you stand where you are right now, and I was wondering what the core values of your company are and how your personal stories kind of played a role into that.
I think at the end of the day, being the whole idea of grit and perseverance, of challenging the status quo is certainly, something that informs what we do as a company. We challenge our clients. And I think when you take risk and you take risk in stride, you're not afraid. You know that there's nothing wrong with challenging an assumption, a presumption, a groupthink, that kind of thing. And so I think that's the thing that most comes out. And we have a lot of the things that you would expect: enthusiasm, accountability. All those things have to be there. We have too many core values, as a matter of fact. All of them are important. Appreciation is important. I know you noted that we do a lot of, volunteer work and giving back. All these things have to come together, but they all can't be equal. And I think that sort of, sense of authority and challenging what is around you, not in an aggressive way, but in a way that where you understand that no progress is made by going along. And so that's sort of, in that regard, status quo is our enemy, is just going along and not helping companies innovate or achieve their dreams or grow exponentially. Yep.
You talked about your mentor a little bit. What advice do you have for us as we start our careers to find the right mentor?
In my case, I was just madly in love with her. You know what I mean? She was so fascinating. She was so interesting. I mean, it's one thing to see somebody who's done certain things or has credentials, but if there is no chemistry, you will not have a true mentorship relationship. For me, it was critical to have somebody that I was interested in, that cared about me, that I cared about, and there was really two-way. It was give and take. You know, I wasn't just learning from her, she was learning from me as well. So, you know, make sure that you have some core chemistry there. Also, and I know there was the earlier question about a female entrepreneur. Many people assume if I'm a woman in business, I need a female mentor. That is not the case, and the same for guys. Just because you're a guy in a technical field doesn't mean you need a male mentor. You know, you can really learn, and you can have people that will really pour into you, and they don't have to fit this exact model of what you think you look like. You know, they just need to want to help you be better. And so, you know, sometimes you find those people in very unexpected places. They aren't the people that are always out leading, but they will pour more into you. So you really have to look at what somebody's willing to give and make sure that you have that chemistry. Hey.
Check. How you doing? Adrian, man, thanks for coming in. Just two quick questions. You talk a lot about risk, but I didn't hear you speak of any fear. How do you feel about fear with, you know, entrepreneurs trying to continue that path? And the second question is early on.
What was that? Fair? What?
Fear.
Fear. Oh, God. Okay, yep.
And the second question is, you seem to have found what you wanted to do pretty early on in your life. How would you approach or give advice to you know, budding entrepreneurs that have a bunch of different challenges they want to solve, and not knowing essentially which one to probably pick out of, you know, the batch of things they want to do?
Okay. Having me try to remember three things is pretty daunting. Let me see if I can knock some of these off quickly. In terms of you know, wanting to take on the world, you've got to focus. You know, and this is a principle in marketing. If you are going to get any kind of beachhead, you need to focus, secure the area, and then move on from there. And what I see most in young entrepreneurs that are very passionate and very excited is they just want to take on everything, and therefore they will not be, you know, particularly successful at anything. So, you know, take it in small steps, you know, really break that down. In terms of fear, it is just something you have to push through. You know, there are not things that fix fear. You know, being more qualified, preparing better, those are things that can help you be more comfortable. But fear is just something, again, it's also something that starts to fall away the more you do something. So, you know, you may have fear up to here the first time you're in certain key meetings, trying to do certain things. But the more you're at it, then that fear comes down. The more something scares you to death, the next time, that's nothing. And so you just kind of have to live through that. The other thing in terms of what to focus on, you mentioned early in my career, I've you know, found out what my passion was. The reason that I did that, and this is critical for anyone, whether you go get a job or you're an entrepreneur, the reason I found out is because I tried everything in the first 3 years. It was not because one day I woke up and went, oh my God, marketing and advertising is the most amazing thing on earth, right? It was because I tried office administration, customer service. I tried marketing. I tried sales. I tried all different incremental things on finance. I tried the technology piece. I was so exposed to all of it, and that's the one that came to life for me, and more importantly, brought me to life and got me excited. And so, you know, make sure that you have enough time wherever you go to try things. If you're going to be in an environment that's, you know, extraordinarily rigid and not give you any flexibility to try other things, that would be one of those to steer away from. I don't care how much they pay you. If they're going to peg you into a hole, 10 years later, you're going to be sitting there in that same damn cube, doing the same thing, and, you will not have those opportunities to learn early that I had.
Very much, Moira.
Absolutely.
Appreciate it.